Learn English through story. A whisper of desire. It was a brisk autumn evening when Amara first heard the whisper. The village of Darwin, nestled in a quiet valley surrounded by dense forests, had long grown accustomed to its renewed cycle of harvests, festivals, and prayers to the old gods. The people were simple and content, with their lives marked by the rhythm of the seasons. Amara, however, was different. At 25, she was one of the few women in the village who had never married. Not for lack of efforts, there had been many farmers, tradesmen, even the village healer had all sought her hand, but none had stirred the passion in her that she longed for. Amara yearned for something more, something beyond the walls of the village, beyond the mundane lives led by the people she grew up with. It was a quiet, gnawing desire, something she could never quite explain to others, but it filled her every waking moment. That night, she stood by the window of her small cottage, staring out into the fading twilight, the wind gently brushing her face. Her thoughts drifted to the old tales her grandmother used to tell her, of strange creatures and ancient spirits that roamed the forests, of forbidden desires and the men and women who had been consumed by them. The stories had always seemed like fairy tales, but there was a part of her that had never quite let go of them. In her heart, she believed there was more to the world than what she could see. Then she heard Ida's soft voice, barely audible, carried on the wind. Amara. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. The voice was delicate, a faint whisper that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. She looked around the room, but there was no one there. Just the flicker of the candlelight and the crackling of the fire. But the whisper came again, more insistent this time, and somehow, it felt as though it was speaking directly to her soul. Amara. Her pulse quickened. She had never heard anything like it. It wasn't a voice she recognized, but it stirred something deep within her, something primal. She walked to the window, gazing out into the darkening forest. The wind had picked up, rustling the leaves, but the village was still. There was no sign of anyone nearby. Still, the whisper persisted, beckoning her. Come. Amara's heart pounded in her chest. She should have been frightened, but instead, she felt a strange sense of longing. It was as if the voice was pulling at the very core of her desires, awakening something she had buried long ago. She threw on her cloak and, without a second thought, stepped outside into the night. The village was quiet, the streets empty. The soft glow of lanterns flickered in the windows of cottages, and the sound of distant crickets filled the air. Amara walked through the cobblestone streets, her steps quickening as she made her way toward the edge of the village, where the forest loomed like a great, dark sentinel. The forest had always been a place of caution. The villagers rarely ventured too deep into its heart, especially at night, for there were tales of creatures that roamed the woods, as spirits, wolves, and things that defied explanation. But tonight, none of those fears mattered. The whisper was growing stronger, more insistent, and Amar felt an irresistible pull toward it. She entered the forest, the towering trees closing in around her. The moonlight barely filtered through the dense canopy, casting long shadows on the forest floor. The air was cool, the smell of damp earth and pine filling her senses. But still, the voice called to her, guiding her deeper into the woods. After what felt like hours, she came to a small clearing, illuminated by the soft glow of the moon. In the center of the clearing stood a figure, a man, tall and slender, with dark hair that cascaded down his back. He was dressed in clothes that seemed ancient, yet regal, and his eyes were like molten gold, glowing faintly in the darkness. Amar stopped, her breath catching in her throat. She had never seen anyone like him before, and yet, there was something strangely familiar about him, as though she had known him her entire life. The man smiled, a slow, seductive smile that sent a shiver down her spine. "You came," he said, his voice low and smooth, like silk. Amara felt her heart race. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. The man stepped closer, his movements graceful, almost otherworldly. "I have many names," he said, "but you may call me Kale." "Kale," she whispered, the name rolling off her tongue like a forbidden secret. "You heard my call," Kale continued, his golden eyes locking onto hers. "You have felt the longing, the desire for something more, something greater than this simple life." Amar nodded, unable to tear her gaze away from him. How did he know? How could he understand the yearning that had consumed her for so long? Kale reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. His touch was electric, sending a jolt of heat through her body. "I can give you what you seek," he whispered. "I can show you the world beyond, the depths of passion and desire that you have only dreamed of." Amara's heart pounded in her chest. She knew this was dangerous, that this Mana, this being was not of her world. But his words stirred something deep within her, a desire so intense that it consumed all rational thought. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Kale smiled again, his golden eyes gleaming. "Only your trust. Come with me, and I will give you everything your heart desires." Amara hesitated. She knew the stories, the warnings about deals with strange beings in the woods, about how desire could lead one down dark paths, but she had spent so long yearning for something more, for a life beyond the ordinary. And now, here was a chance to have it. She hesitated, her mind racing. "I don't know if I can." Kale's smile faltered, and for the first time, she saw something in his eyes, something dark, something dangerous. "You must decide," he said softly. "Once you choose, there is no turning back." Amara's heart pounded in her chest. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her, the enormity of what was being offered. But beneath it all, there was a voice, a small, quiet voice that whispered a warning. Desire could be dangerous. It could consume you, lead you down a path from which there was no return. But the pull was too strong, the ache in her heart, the longing for something more, it was overwhelming. And so, with a trembling breath, Amara nodded. "Yes," she whispered, "I will go with you." Kale's smile returned, his eyes glowing with triumph. He reached out, taking her hand in his, and in that moment, Amara felt a surge of power unlike anything she had ever known. It coursed through her veins, filling her with a sense of euphoria, of fulfillment. She had never felt so alive. "Come," Kale said, pulling her toward him. "I will show you the world." And so, Amara left the village of Garwin behind, stepping into a world of shadow and light, of passion and desire. With Kale by her side, she explored the depths of her own longing, experiencing pleasures and emotions she had never dreamed possible. Days and nights blurred together as she was swept up in a whirlwind of sensation, losing herself in the intoxicating power of Kale's world. But as time passed, Amara began to notice something. The more she indulged in her desires, the more hollow she felt. The initial euphoria had faded, replaced by a growing emptiness. She had everything she had ever wanted: a passion, excitement, a life beyond the mundane, and yet, something was missing. One night, as she lay beside Kale in a lavish palace of shadow and gold, she turned to him, her heart heavy with doubt. "Kale," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Is this all there is?" Kale looked at her, his golden eyes narrowing. "What do you mean?" I thought this would make me happy," Amara said, her voice breaking. "But I feel empty." Kale's gaze darkened. "You asked for desire, you asked for more than your simple life." "I gave you what you wanted." Amara shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "But it's not enough. I thought desire would fill the void inside me, but it hasn't. It's only made it worse." Kale sat up, his expression cold. "You made a choice, Amara. You chose this life. There is no going back." Amara's heart sank. She had known the risks, known that there would be a price to pay, but she had never imagined it would feel like these, like a void that could never be filled. Desperation clawed at her, and she reached out to Kale, her voice pleading. "There must be something more, something beyond desire. Please, help me." Kale's golden eyes flashed with anger. "Desire is all there is," he said coldly. "It is the only truth in this world, the only thing that matters." Amara's heart broke. She had been wrong. Desire had consumed her, but it had not given her what she truly needed. It had only left her empty, a shell of the person she once was. She pulled away from Kale, her mind racing. She could not stay here, in this world of shadows and longing. She needed something more, something real, something that would fill the void inside her, not with fleeting pleasures, but with meaning. Without another word, she stood and left the palace, her heart heavy with regret. She wandered through the forest, the once beautiful landscape now feeling cold and distant. The whispers that had once lured her now seemed like cruel echoes of her own mistakes. As she walked, Amara realized something. The happiness she had been searching for, the fulfillment she had craved, it had never been in the world of desire. It had been in the life she had left behind, in the simple joys of her village, in the love and connections she had taken for granted. Tears streamed down her face as she made her way back to Garwin, the weight of her choices heavy on her shoulders. She had given up everything for a whisper of desire, and in doing so, she had lost herself. When she finally returned to the village, it was as though no time had passed. The people went about their lives, unaware of the journey she had taken. Amara stood at the edge of the village, watching them, her heart filled with both sorrow and hope. She had learned a hard truth that desire, unchecked, could lead to destruction. But she had also learned that there was more to life than fleeting pleasures. There was love, connection, and the simple beauty of everyday moments. And so, with a quiet resolve, Amara stepped back into the village, ready to rebuild her life. She would no longer chase after whispers of desire, but instead, she would find peace in the life she had once tried to escape. For true happiness, she realized, came not from fulfilling every desire, but from finding contentment in the life you have. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you enjoyed, then please like and share this video, and don't forget to subscribe our YouTube channel. Thank you for watching.